Western right movements find themselves at a dead end, brought about by the paths taken in developing their political projects, which were created under conditions of very weak initial potential and general suppression from all sides in the Western world after World War II. The reason for this dead end lies in the fact that the modern political and financial system and society as a whole is maintained by a balance supported by concrete levers of control. These levers were established during the post-war reconstruction of the world after World War II. One manifestation of these levers is the prevention of any political force from gaining power in any state that could enact a fundamental radical restructuring of society based on idealistic values. This explains why, after the establishment of the world order following World War II, there have been no new explicitly pro-Soviet, Stalinist, or other communist regimes, nor have there been radical right regimes. Salazar's Portugal, after the war, was constantly bogged down by its inability to solve its society's urgent problems, economic difficulties, and the failure to solve its issues through military means. For example, it was unable to respond to the occupation of Goa by Indian troops, and it generally faced failure in colonial wars. Franco's Spain and the Colonel's Greece also failed to achieve regime stability or offer the world their ideas or lifestyle for export. They could not establish themselves as unique phenomena. When the regimes faltered from above, there was almost no one to come to their aid in the middle or from below. The replacement of post-war so-called right regimes with new democratic ones happened with the agreement of elites from above, and the external justification for the existence of remnants of right regimes often boiled down to merely countering the communist threat. At the same time, fundamental societal changes in line with the ideology, the communitarian approach, and positive biopolitics were not implemented, as the leadership of these countries prioritized the economic interests of the upper financial political echelon rather than broad prospects for national development, the creation of viral, relevant ideologies, and relative autarky. Latin American right regimes were generally very dubious projects, with their leaders being eager for power's sake, rather than for the realization of ideas. At the same time, phenomena such as right Greece and communist Cuba were only possible with the support of major political powers, the USA and the USSR, if they were interested in the existence of such regimes. Interesting changes occurred only on the periphery, in Asian countries and Africa. However, even on the periphery, the coming to power of outright idealists, such as the African Che Guevara, Thomas Sankara, usually ended with the destruction of such leaders and their entourages, and their replacement with more moderate figures. The global balance was maintained by financial political elites on a level of global influence. In particular, in the Western world, it was maintained by Western political elites who preemptively destroyed any possibility of political forces carrying out radical social changes. One example of maintaining this balance was the deliberate reduction of the leftist agenda to a struggle for minority rights, shifting the focus from the need for class struggle to sexual deviance and the like, carried out by intelligence agents. For example, Herbert Marcuse, or the famous feminist Gloria Steinem. In the future, we will operate with the term right, equating it to the identity of any religious organizations. We proceed from the assertion that the worldview of the right is both a political religion and something more than that. The right is a political religion purely in the social sphere. On the personal level, in terms of worldview and life orientations, it is undoubtedly something much more. We also proceed from the belief that loving certain ideas and striving for their implementation, cooperating in their emanation, and establishing what has been realized, this is true political activity. The maintenance of such a balance, as we've noted, is possible only under conditions of a certain stability at the top. There is a consensus regarding the world order, and no drastic movements to the right or left are permitted within the controlled territories. With the disappearance of the USSR, the last purely ideological regime vanished from the Western oikoumene. The prevailing ideology among the groups of modern financial and political elites, who, we do not exclude, may even be at odds with one another, is too broad a question for this report, but we can be certain of two things. One, the desire to maintain their status as financial and political elites, that is, to remain influential and wealthy. Two, the dominance of various versions of the progressive liberal myth among the majority of elites, which is entirely compatible with their desire to transform society into a two-class system. This applies to those who are proponents of the Eurasian myth as well. Eurasianism is just as hostile to the right as the USSR was, and Eurasianists and Putin despise the right. Diplomatic Eurasianism is one of the insidious enemies of the right, which, when it comes to foreign relations, tries to mimic something friendly in order to infiltrate and gain influence. But when Eurasianists confront right representatives face to face, they attempt to destroy them by any means possible. In this way, the Eurasianists are trying to destroy the Ukrainian nation, openly declaring that the goal of their activities, according to their current leader, a former KGB officer, is the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Moreover, representatives of the so-called Eurasian elites use Eurasianism primarily for controlling their own populations and pushing their external interests. These Eurasian elites are mostly westernized themselves, and they all generally possess a diseased worldview. When a person is a convinced Eurasianist, they are primarily a bearer of the ideas of a continental melting pot and the destruction of the core of European culture. Therefore, Russia is a state with a power-hungry and anti-right oligarchic elite, driven by sinister ideas, a facade of Eurasianism that is itself a pathological ideology, and a societal doctrine of the melting pot. It is openly trying to destroy its neighboring nation, justifying this with the need to combat the right. At the same time, we must understand what a state is and why the financial and political elites do not allow anyone ideologically dangerous and, above all, alien to them to achieve political power within the framework of representative or any other form of democracy. A state is a corporate structure that allows for control over the population and natural resources within a certain territory. In conducting a preliminary analysis of the behavior of modern elites, we start with their entirely organic and understandable desire to perpetuate their influence, power, and access to resources for an unlimited amount of time. Today, the financial and political elites are far from being represented solely by members of the state apparatus. Although state corporations still exist, many contemporary actors in history and politics wield power through various non-state corporate giants, from trading companies to those who dominate technology. In a world cleansed of dangerous idealists and radicals, only elite competition remains. Their opponents must become full-fledged counter-elites. The war between elites and counter-elites is the entire political history of the world. What exactly is our dead end? Currently, the Western right exists in three forms. Political parties. Typically, they are created by a group of interested, ideologically motivated individuals. These parties are oriented toward current politics, achieving some success thanks to the balance between competing elite groups or due to popular support during waves of relevant political events. However, they are forced to adjust their declared ideas and wishes for societal structure to legal and societal norms, as well as the media agenda. They do not achieve grand success because, even in their moderate form, they are usually not fully integrated into the political balance of the Western world, and their representatives are not embedded in the diamond necklace engraved with the names of major banks, resource companies, and tech corporations. Nevertheless, representatives of political parties can make connections among wealthy individuals, government officials, and others, often have some financial resources, and exert some influence on the political life of their country. Activist structures. These are ideological right associations, often hierarchical and resembling security companies without wages and work experience, or firms offering entertainment services, ranging from mass events to skiing or regulated violence. Decentralized and isolated representatives. These individuals are infected with various forms of right ideological virus, but they do not constitute any significant force, hold no positions in government, possess no significant wealth, and have no substantial influence. Now, let's focus on activist structures. They have several major problems. The viscous ground of activist life. Like any religious sect, they begin their journey and continue to exist in the same form for years. They are subject to persecution and suppression, which limits their number of participants. Persecution, suppression, and legal and societal norms create a certain ceiling that prevents the growth of such structures. Otherwise, fan-based organizations would have had thousands of members, and the number of years of existence would correlate with the number of participants in any form of progression. The very format of activist structures, if we take Casa Pound as an average example, creates a specific image for them, which in turn establishes narrow entry barriers, paints a very specific portrait of their typical participant, and limits their development. It's worth mentioning, referring to political movement researcher Emilio Gentile, that activist movements appeared in the U.S. as a phenomenon in the form of party armies, structures attached to political parties that provided free services to those parties to turn them into full-fledged corporations, recruiting voters and supporters for mass party events. In some cases, they served as a pool for selecting personnel for special structures connected to the party. On the other hand, the opposite path exists. The logic of social dynamics, based on historical examples, suggests that an activist structure is a religious ideological association capable of transforming and generating other political phenomena. But we will return to that later. Lack of quality personnel. First, we are talking about young cadres who, when determining their life path, choose to devote more time to science, other, more respected, and prestigious societal projects, or making money or creating businesses. Second, we are talking about already trained personnel in existing state business and other structures who lack time or motivation to join vague public projects, primarily because they do not understand their ideology or the role of these ideas in their own lives. Lack of social connections and finances. This directly follows from the two previous points. First, useful connections with government representatives, businesses, and elites are difficult to establish and quickly break due to suppression. Second, the format of the activist structure itself, as noted above, repels potential sponsors and patrons. Usually, the social connections of an activist structure, built from scratch, are formed when certain state or other political structures express a desire to use the activist structure for their own interests. So, bypassing further analysis, we arrive at the most important question: how to overcome this dead end, how to avoid it, get out of this maze, or break through the wall that such associations face. One of the obvious steps many activist groups have tried is to create a political party. However, this requires at least minimal finances and connections from the start, and the path of a political party is not a guarantee of success, but could lead to the next dead end, which may be even more problematic due to the scale of threats. You must be able to realistically and adequately assess your position in the world, and have examples of other similar structures for comparison: Islamic Jamaats, Christian sects, occult communities, Masonic orders, Zionist organizations, business structures. Even Chicago gangsters, as described in Sudhir Venkatesh's book, Gang Leader for a Day, have more influence than many right organizations worldwide. This is a reason to reflect on your place in the food chain. Mythomania, one of the most severe obstacles to the realization of the right's ideas. Certain actions make no sense in a coordinate system where the rules that give value to those actions are not established. However, if you are engaged in the need to act against the logic of the moment, you're highly likely to face failure. Many right organizations after World War II tried to emulate pre-war right organizations. This could not lead them to success, but the cargo cult principle and the imagination of leaders and ordinary members, overwhelmed with various political myths, insisted on certain behaviors and action plans. We know the result. Right idealists carry little weight in the West. Personnel decide everything. This was said by Joseph Stalin to the graduates of military academies who were to become the backbone of his Red Army. Stalin had a giant state apparatus under his control and could train personnel in official institutions where they were prepared according to an established training program, and their results and compliance with necessary criteria could be tested through exams and qualification confirmation. You do not have that ability. You face two paths: train cadres and recruit them by convincing a formed and prepared person to join the right. You must work in both directions. To implement the right's ideas, you need skilled organizers, people with experience in a wide variety of professions, intellectually savvy individuals. In short, you need everyone who can be called quality. The more of them you have, the better. The question is where to find them. To do this, you must become a right HR, not to offer people a job in an IT company, but to find the key to their hearts. This is a painstaking and difficult task, but the only true value you will have on your path is people. Everything else can be acquired. Thus, education and proselytism, your own qualifications and authority. To demand anything from the world, to have the right to wish for the transformation of reality, according to the ideas of the right, you must be qualified, prepared, and educated yourself. No one will grant you social authority. On the contrary, they will gladly play along so that you seem like a group of dangerous, in the worst sense, and limited individuals. Your background cannot be purely political or activist. A self-made man from the world of business, a retired military officer, a doctor with years of experience, a talented writer, are far better personas than right activist or politician. You need to view the format of the activist structure as a forge for personnel. You cannot remain in the activist format for too long. You can preserve it by assigning the role mentioned above to the activist structure. But these personnel must be involved in potentially more influential projects. You will achieve greater success if you engage your organization's core in creating a business structure when the path of a political party clearly has no prospect. You can create anything with an internal ethic and a function of resource acquisition, and move along the path of developing something stable and promising. For example, why not open an agricultural firm together, or start an IT company? Perhaps you should get involved in the security business or tourism. This would be much more useful for the cause than political public activism. Finally, would you not be of more use, even more than in your country, to the Ukrainian nation, which is right now fighting for its survival against Russian invaders? If you truly love the right, this is one of the main paths by which you can defend this truly unique European nation and give it a chance to live with the worldview core of the right. The armed forces of Ukraine gladly accept foreigners into their ranks, and right representatives, without exaggeration, form the backbone of Ukraine's armed forces. This has happened both due to the war and the traditions of the Ukrainian nation. Moreover, as mentioned earlier, Russia is an open enemy of Ukrainian right nationalists. In armed struggle against Russia, you will embark on an open path of fighting against the enemies of the right. You need to analyze the situation you are in, according to the above points. One of the most important factors for success in our cause is the realization of the necessity to play the long game. You need to understand that any project you work on in the public sphere, the development path of your community, and your personal journey only hold historical significance if you play the long game, diligently and gradually, for a very long time, occasionally changing tactics, and steadily moving toward implementing your ideas. Only by playing the long game and not expecting quick results will you be able to achieve success. This may seem obvious, but few people truly have the endurance and readiness to act in any conditions, striving toward their goal. We must use every minute for productive work. Every opportunity must be seized to take steps forward in developing our communities and implementing our ideas. Will you have the inner strength if you know that it will take 4 to 5 years of preparation to fully unfold your projects, and only then move on to realizing your planned endeavors? People who want to master a profession spend several years studying in universities and professional institutions. So why are many often unwilling to dedicate a few years to education? finding the necessary resources, establishing essential connections, and acquiring the qualifications needed to fight for the right. The key to this issue is the ability to set a goal. It is necessary not just to love ideas and adopt a certain worldview, and not only to set daily rules of life in accordance with it. You must create an achievable goal for implementing and dominating these ideas. And most importantly, define a tangible goal that stems from this worldview. Once the goal is set, you need to develop a step-by-step strategy to achieve it. To correctly determine all the steps required to realize the ideas of the right, you must critically and adequately assess reality and never hope for miracles. According to Machiavelli, a worthy man has two components on his path to success: fortuna and virtues. He adds that luck plays a secondary role, and without its assistance, one can still move toward the goal by relying solely on virtues. Virtues in the sense that this word was understood by the men of action during the Renaissance and ancient Rome. You must cultivate virtues. This is your battering ram on the path of life, filled with obstacles. By relying on your cultivated virtues, your qualifications, and preparedness, you will reach your goal. You will be able to critically and adequately assess reality, first, by communicating with people from all walks of life, analyzing their life experiences, understanding which people can at least minimally influence the surrounding reality and which cannot. Secondly, you need to study social sciences, history, and the intellectual developments of your opponents. Both the liberal vision of reality and the detailed study of the Marxist worldview will prove useful to you. Furthermore, you should send representatives of your structures for education, internships, and acquiring experience, provided that you maintain a high degree of cohesion and strong connections among the members of your organization, ensuring that their identity and sense of belonging do not dissolve in the other communities they will encounter along the way. Taqiyya. In conditions of pressure and distrust, you should not proclaim your allegiance to certain ideas unless it has practical meaning. If you are educating a new comrade who helps you with the hardest work, no problem there. If you are cultivating worthy personnel for the development of your projects, also acceptable, but with caveats. Everyone should know only as much as their intellectual abilities allow. But with most people, you must speak only in language they understand. For this, you will need to guess what language they understand, study their conceptual framework during communication and interaction, and choose the right words to establish friendly relations for practical purposes on the way to realizing your goal. Proselytism should be conducted wisely. In most cases, it makes no sense to tell the first person you meet about the ideas of the right. Your silence and the concealment of the right's ideas, akin to the Islamic principle of Taqiyya, often bring more benefit than loud chatter and showy performances. When you think you are engaged in propaganda or advertising, always assess: who will this persuade to accept the ideas of the right? Who will this place on your side? Meaningful silence, mimicry, and adopting roles that are acceptable in society are far better than covering yourself head to toe in right tattoos or shouting the same thing on the street for years. The point is that you must strive for practical results, not showmanship. Be more critical of yourself regarding appearance, behavior, and the way you convey the ideas of the right. Order identity. We must strive for the cohesion of knightly orders and Masonic lodges. The ideas of the Western right are foreign to this world, and therefore, anyone who fights for them in any corner of it is like a brother of the Jesuit order in Eastern countries in ancient times. Any brother knew that wherever he was, there was a center that inspired him to act, where he was awaited, where his ideas were shared, where people already lived according to the rules of monastic brotherhood. You must become such a center for your people and ensure communication with them in this format. All of this is clear, but you yourself, of course, would also like to feel the existence of such a center. The Jesuit order has already passed its prime, and you are not a monk missionary among samurai and peasants. The situation tempts us to recall a more recent example of our former opponents, the International Ideological Order Agency, called the Comintern. The Comintern is a story of relative success in spreading the ideas of class struggle and communism around the world. Sometimes operating as an information bureau, it provided constant visible and invisible presence for communists, hovered over their groups of any size and influence like a good caretaker, took control of those who needed it, and gained control over those who didn't ask for it, and helped them in every possible way. The Comintern itself was also a kind of ideological core of the Soviet Union, because first, the most ideological communists joined it, and second, it operated as a think tank and advertising agency. It painted a utopian image of the USSR in people's minds. The global right requires an international network. You could even call it a right intern, if you will. Besides the Jesuit sense of a center, there is something encouraging in the possibility of its existence. The Comintern emerged before the Soviet Union was established, and later, in one of its incarnations, continued to exist even after its collapse. Today, there is a state and a nation that can offer the global right the sense of a center. We will discuss this later, but the Jesuit brothers maintained a stable identity and confident belonging to the order under the worst, absolutely intolerable conditions. They were filled with pure faith, the kind that could not be shaken by the ordeals imposed by Eastern peoples who did not accept Christianity. There is much to learn from this: pure faith and the preservation of inner confidence. The Taqiyya principle mentioned above will also come in handy here. One Jesuit brother named Roberto de Nobili grew tired of direct attacks on Hinduism and decided to penetrate its heart, creating a hidden version of the Catholic faith, in which Christian saints, Christ, and other symbols and attributes of Catholicism were transformed into Indian enlightened figures and gods. The brother himself became an Indian sadhu, learned several local languages, sacred texts, and became a disciple of several spiritual masters. He maintained the Catholic core of his faith and continued his work to strengthen the influence of the order in Catholicism. Pope Gregory XV approved his mission. It is on this level that you must preserve faith in the right and be ready to maintain your belonging to it, under any circumstances. Mental viruses, viral ideologies, political religions. Many ideas function like viruses. They have no single center of dissemination, no specific representatives, yet they still manage to capture people, break into reality through their actions, or directly influence it. Currently, there are three opposing ideas to the modern Western worldview that infect people: the right, the Protestant version of Christianity, and certain branches of Islam. 100 years ago, this list included the Catholic social idea, along with the ethical and aesthetic potential of Catholicism, as well as communism. Times have changed. The idea of class struggle and the bearded political economist no longer inspire the creation of influential cells aiming to establish worker-peasant states, or even to build collective farms and truly communist colonies. Opus Dei and other Vatican initiatives have failed to capture enough hearts, and the figure of Christ now captivates minds, not through the somber solemnity of Gothic cathedrals or the pomp of masses, but through simple answers to complex questions. Islam is radically expanding its sphere of influence and presents a genuine alternative to the modern Western worldview. The right's living manifestations are currently the weakest of the triad, but they have the potential to develop just as strongly as the Protestant churches and Islamic jamaats. Take example from the proselytizing persistence of Baptist preachers and followers of Muhammad. If a Sunni Muslim moves into a dormitory, there's a good chance there will soon be two Sunni Muslims there. If there is an evangelical center in a city, their church will soon have worshipers, while Catholic and Orthodox temples remain empty. They infiltrate every place they can reach, settle into every job available, and enroll in every educational opportunity that presents itself. But it's not just about proselytism. Right ideas circulate around the world and fall into people's minds like dandelion seeds carried by the wind. They take root in any fertile soil and grow there. It is in your best interest to actively monitor the harvest to gather it up and create seed varieties that will sprout faster. You have an immense body of work ahead, encompassing various marketers, advertising specialists, and social technologists. The form is unimportant. The process of sowing, cultivating, and tending is what matters. The right is a worldview in a sense close to religion, and in the public sphere, its forms function as political religions. You must understand one simple thing. The ideas of the right in the modern world can only be implemented on the periphery, where there is still freedom. Moreover, they can only be realized on fertile ground. Among Western peoples, the only one that demonstrates health is the Ukrainian people. Ukraine is an example of the embodiment of an idea whose bearers have endured trials and obstacles on the path to its realization that most Western rightists could not even imagine, let alone experience firsthand, as did the dreamers of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, led by Colonel Konovalets, Melnik, and Bandera, or other prominent figures of the Ukrainian elite. Ukraine was an imaginary entity for countless years. It fought for this imagined Ukraine against the terrible state machines of its opponents, against hostile secret services and armies, at the cost of heavy, terrible sacrifices. These are not just words. No European nation has endured such a bloody struggle without having its own country and state apparatus for as long as the Ukrainians have. Ukraine, as a reality, was literally created out of thin air, from ruins and under unbearable conditions, by Ukrainian right nationalists. The realized Ukraine is far from perfect, but it has one key aspect. What the first-rate Ukrainian right intellectual Yuri Lipa identified as the essence of the eternal city of Kiev in his eponymous essay. It is a community of free people. It is freedom, for which the price is the willingness to risk one's life and die for it. It is the principle of establishing the position of the master and the slave. As per Hegel, the first risks, puts their life on the line, and wins freedom. There are enough such people in Ukraine. By Western standards, Ukraine is Europe's Somalia, the periphery. By Western standards, anything is possible in Ukraine. By Russia's hateful standards, the Ukrainian nation is the core of the right. And this is why, as the Russians themselves declare, they are trying to destroy it. Similar views about the Ukrainian right are held by representatives of destructive left-wing sects. Ukrainians preserve their ancient qualities. This is fully evident in their modern capacity for struggle. Ukrainians are a nation corporation. Its population is not measured by census, but by the number of warriors' bayonets. Only in Ukraine is the dominance of the right possible in the modern world. Thus, the geopolitical program of all Western rightists must be concise and direct. Work, develop, live in defiance, resist, fight with all your might, against all for Ukraine.